We learned in the military how to navigate and operate in chaos. Yeah. And right now, the business environment, our social environment, our political environment is chaos.
Welcome to Word Money, the show devoted to supporting our brother and sister veterans. I'm Patrick Murphy.
And I'm Dan Kunze.
Today, we're joined by my buddy, Paul Rieckhoff, an Army veteran, the founder of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, and one of the most recognized voices of our post-9/11 veterans. Paul has spent decades on the front lines of policy, media, activism, and fighting the good fight to make sure our brother and sister voices are heard where decisions are being made. So here's a big question, bottom line up front. What does real leadership look like, Paul, for our post-9/11 veterans?
It looks like the Giants when they whooped the Eagles 2 weeks ago. I thought we were going to start with that, man. We're not going to start with football. We're not going to start with the Giants. I mean, this is being recorded before the rematch. So I got to take, my space when I can. We haven't beaten you very often.
So, all right.
There's some advocacy right there.
For the
We've been friends a long time. So
we've been friends a long time. When the Giants won the Super Bowl, I'm an Eagles fan. I used to work for the Eagles. We honored them with a resolution in Congress that passed 412-1. I was the one vote against voting for the Giants. Paul is still not forgiving me, so he's busting my chops here on national podcast.
That was the high point of their year.
So authenticity is what you're saying. Vote your conscience.
You know what? I think, I think maybe I'd just say teamwork, right? It's overused, but I think having teamwork at the highest level all the way down to the lowest level, and when it all comes together, it's a thing of beauty, whether it's a football team, it's a school, or it's a business. And I think that too often people underestimate the importance of having a plan. Yeah. I mean, you guys discuss it with your guests all the time. I mean, sitting down and actually putting pen to paper and drawing out a plan with goals, execution, timeline, budget, and people. Yep. Right, finding the right spots on the team for the people that you have. Yep. In the military, you don't always have the choice. You can't go to the free agent market and pick up whoever you want. But I think in the veterans community, especially, you have folks that know how to do different things, and leaders can cobble that together into something that's really formidable. And if you get it all clicking, it looks like the Giants against the Eagles 2 weeks ago. And if you get it clicking for periods of time, it looks like the Eagles over the last couple of years, right? Yeah. But I do think culture is really important, and I think that's really underestimated, especially outside the military community, and starts at the top. It starts with your energy. It starts with your vibe. It starts with your example, right? And as parents ourselves, I think that's my most important social entrepreneur endeavor is my 2 little boys, right? That's my most important business, my most important focus. They're 10 and 6, and that's where I'm always thinking. But what I learn as a father, I think helps in the professional life.
Yeah, we're all dads, young kids, well, boys, and I have a girl. But what I think is great is that you two, Dan and Paul, you guys met up at West Point. Your sons were at the baseball camp. Dan, tell us about that.
That was the coolest experience, one of the coolest experiences of my life. Like, I'm going to get to that in 1 second. Your comment, though, about writing down your plan is literally exactly why I was at I know this sounds crazy, but it's why I was at baseball camp for my son, right? So, I got an 8-year-old that seems like he likes baseball, right? And you can get into youth sports really aggressive, really young. Or you can make sure that they love the game with things that you love too, which is why I took my son to West Point's baseball camp. It was so cool. And then I started talking to some guy there, and he seemed really opinionated, really there. I was like, this guy. And then all of a sudden we connected.
Paul's not shy with this.
No, it was not shy.
I was like, hey, you were in the Army.
And then we connected that we knew you.
And then, we know this guy.
Yeah.
And we still became friends despite that.
Yeah, despite that.
But I think, you know what, that was a cool experience too, because it underscores the power of the Veterans Network.
100%.
Right? Like, you meet another vet, you have a common language, you have common friends, you have common experiences. You kind of approach even raising your kids, I think, differently,
100%,
right?
100%.
And my kids know if I'm talking to another vet that they're going to click with those kids, right? And that was
He said one of the
the
kindest things about me and leaving. I don't even know if he knows that he said one of the nice things, but he said something about Gabe about yo, listen to your dad, he knows what he's talking about. Was essentially the way he left, or at least something like your dad's a good man, or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And so when another man tells your son a good thing about it, it transcends you saying anything about it. It's a really awesome recognition when somebody like Paul does that. And it's like, that's the sort of thing that cascades through. And I'll never forget that.
I appreciate that. I think what I remember the moment you were out there throwing the ball with your son. Like everybody else had kind of left. I think it was hot. It was like 100 degrees that week, right?
Yep.
And the kids had a great opportunity to go to West Point, play in a Division I facility, to go in the locker rooms, and also see the history. And the cadets were there for
it was
for
so
Hell
cool.
Week, like
Yeah, it
the
was
same
so cool.
time. So for them to be able to play baseball with a bunch of good coaches in that environment and have the cadets and the example and just the atmosphere. But he was the guy who was there throwing with his kid afterward. And that's, I think, what kind of life is all about. Like, the good dads when you see them, the good leaders when you see them, and they're usually the people who care about people, who put in the focus, who set the example. And that's what the West Point community is all about. But also just being able to have that connection, I think, underscores the potential of our community. You and I have been working in the space for 20 years, and it's only just getting started. Right now, we've got guys from our generation that are the Secretary of Defense and the Vice President. And whether you agree with them or not, I think this is a moment where our community is kind of cresting. And I think very soon we're going to have one of our own in the White House. And I think that'll be kind of a culminating moment for our movement. I think we may have multiple veterans from our generation in the White House.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. And I think what you were both talking about, and what we talk about, if you're transitioning out of the military, or if you're in the military, your most important job is your family. Being a dad will be the best job I ever have in my life, right? And way better than running the Army, way better than serving in combat, all that stuff. But Paul, listen, you obviously a Iraq War veteran, infantry officer, Amherst grad. You give back to Amherst as a professor. What are some of the things you do now that you're not part of IAVA? You founded it, you're the CEO of it, you're on a board of it, but you're transitioning out of it now. What are some of the things that you do now that help you retain that purpose-driven life?
Well, I think, once you get it in your blood that you want to be focused on mission first, everything else is secondary. And candidly, what I needed to do after founding IAVA and running it for 15 years, which was kind of like 15 combat deployments, or like 15 runs for office.
It's always something,
right? Running a
nonprofit
is very difficult, and it's exhausting because you got to do all the things that your for-profit peers do, but you got to do it with no technology investment, no HR, no bonuses, no 401k.
No capital
right?
structure.
Yeah, you can't really invest ahead, right? It's really frowned upon. You're supposed to spend down your budget every year, right? So you have to do everything everyone else has to do, but with less, right? It's kind of like improvising, adapting, and overcoming in the military, right? Here's what you got, make do. So I think that I brought that with me to everything that I do now. You have to be resourceful, you have to be focused, you have to be efficient, you have to be creative. But I also needed to step back and focus on my kids because I had given my life to that business. It was a nonprofit business for 15 years. And I said, my wife wanted to step forward for a little while and launch her business, and she did that. And I really also wanted to focus on my kids during COVID. They were 1 and 4, I think, when COVID hit. And raising young boys in America is a challenge, but I really needed to focus on them. At the same time, I recognized that out of the Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America movement was something even bigger. And it was an unheard, homeless middle of people who weren't Republicans, who weren't Democrats, who wanted to continue to serve and wanted to run for office. So I created a group called Independent Veterans of America that's focused on empowering veterans who want to run for office, from Senate all the way down to the school board. And I launched a media company because, as you guys know, I don't think there are enough strong independent voices in the media. I think the media is broken. The traditional broadcast media is broken. This is a very important and exciting time for the stories we care about: national security, fatherhood, independent politics, but also recognizing and elevating leaders who are meeting this moment in politics, in their home life, in creative arts. Guys like Sebastian Younger, Ken Burns have been on my show. So I launched a podcast called Independent Americans, which focuses on that conversation. What does it mean to be independent? What does it mean to be American? And who are the leaders that we can elevate and hear from to help guide us through what are some pretty tough times? And I think that's maybe a bigger message. We learned in the military how to navigate and operate in chaos. And right now, the business environment, our social environment, our political environment is chaos. You've got to be able to navigate that effectively and get to the other side and get to a goal. And I think that's why veterans especially are going to excel in the next few years.
I love that. Why do you think we're living through this transition time of chaos? Because I totally agree with you. But what do you see that's making that happen?
I think it's our new normal. I mean, I think it's a confluence of events. I mean, it's a disruption of technology. It's the emergence of AI. It's climate change. It's the political failures. I think most of the traditional bureaucratic systems have failed people, right? Whether you feel it's the federal government or it's the media. People are looking for something better, and I think it's a really exciting but very disruptive time. There's also violence around the world. There's war in Ukraine. So I think folks feel a little unstable. They feel unsafe. They're coming out of COVID, and it's an opportunity in that crisis to build new things that have new approaches. But I do think this is our new normal. If people think it's going to settle down and next year is going to be different, I don't think so. I think this is the new normal, and we as veterans especially are well positioned to navigate that, and not just navigate it, but lead and provide an example to others who may be, frankly, a little bit vexed or overwhelmed by the chaos of the moment.
You also have almost an entire leadership class of a generation, like the baby boomers or whatever you want to say, kind of graduating out of their ability to be leadership, right? So then, therefore, you've got your next millennial generations and your generations after that. So I think you're right, but I also think that there's stability in the future when new leadership comes into place, which I think you also mentioned when we talked about our generation coming up and playing.
Yeah, I mean, Patrick and I were around back in like 04, 05 when I think the Time magazine cover came out and called us the next greatest generation. I don't know if we're the next greatest generation. That's a pretty high bar, but the greatest generation came home from World War II, reinvented this country, created the middle class, and created a generation of business, political, social, global leaders, right? I think that our generation is kind of meeting the moment by coming out of those shared experiences from 9/11, from Iraq, from Afghanistan, from COVID, from this political chaos that's happening now, and they're kind of like a knife through butter. I think most of all, what America's looking for is leadership. Looking for strong, moral, ethical leadership, people they can trust, people that are no bullshit, people that talk honestly about the facts on the ground, whether it's the facts of a housing crisis or the facts of a political crisis.
Yeah. Just tell people the truth.
And we're folks that have been trained to be leaders. So if you handed, Patrick a coffee company, he could probably figure it out and put together the pieces and augment his weaknesses to lead that coffee company. And that's ultimately what I think you're seeing is people rising to this moment and providing stability. But most of all, America is so hungry for leadership right now. And you know it when you see it, right? You know a guy who can throw a fastball when you see it. And when you see a leader, Americans know that, and they're just looking for more. And I think part of our job, you guys have done a great job of this, is encouraging other leaders,
100%.
Mentoring other leaders, and amplifying and elevating.
Yeah, and like you said, there is a trust deficit in America. People don't believe in our institutions or corporations or churches, et cetera. And, you're seeing our generation of veterans step up to the plate and do that. And partially because, Paul, they have the moral courage to put the country first before the political party, to do what's necessary. I mean, you did that at IAVA. We partnered hand in glove on the post-9/11 GI Bill. People forget the unemployment rate for veterans was 16%. We were fighting, I remember, and I'd be comparing notes with you. All right, you say, hey, get this member of Congress, that one, because we didn't have them. People were like, well, how are you going to pay for it? Hey, well, you have the trillions of dollars for Iraq and Afghanistan. How about our brothers and sisters coming home who are unemployed right now? Give them the GI Bill. Let them, get that return on investment for our society. And now the unemployment rate's under 4% for veterans. Actually better for veterans than it is for civilians.
Yeah.
What were some of the leaders that you looked at, whether they're political leaders or business leaders, that you say, hey, that guy's throwing a fastball, that gal's throwing a fastball, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they've done and what they're going to continue to do?
The first name that comes to mind to me right now is John McCain. Because I grew up at a time where I said to somebody the other day, part of why I joined the military is because I read John McCain's book. And he was a leader of courage. He was a leader who stepped up, a leader who sacrificed. Because I think leadership is ultimately about sacrifice. I think too often, especially if you listen to the tech bro world, leadership's about a Learjet or about getting paid or about being able to have a show. No, leadership's about sacrifice, fundamentally, in my view. Yeah. I don't think we have enough servant leaders. I think both of you have been a great example of that. Patrick, you especially, you could make a lot more money doing other things, but you served in government, you served in Congress. And I think really that was an inspiration for me as a leader like John McCain, that boy, how much would we miss John McCain right now? In this moment, the ability to bring people together, to be civil, to be respectful. You met John McCain. He still joke around and give you crap, right?
And he would give me a hard time publicly.
Absolutely.
You better be ready for his fastball when you're standing in front of him.
But that's a guy who people knew spoke the truth and was honest and honorable and was trusted around the world. Yeah. I think that was really important. I used to say for a long time, John McCain was the most famous veteran in the world, right? He was an American veteran at that time, and he was. He was trusted around the world for his honesty, for being earnest, for being a person of integrity, and a person who put country over party. Yeah. And I think that's ultimately what we need more of, people who are willing to demonstrate that they're putting their country first, even if it means profits, right? And in your audience especially, sometimes folks are going to have to make the hard decision that might cost them a little bit of money, but might treat your people better, might be the right thing to do. And I think too many people in business haven't served, don't have a moral code, don't have honor, don't have ethics, don't have values. And I think that's led to a bit of the disintegration that we see when it comes to integrity in our businesses.
We're going to take a quick break, but it's one of those things I teach at Wharton. I teach these business leaders, say, hey, we always talk about the shareholder, right? The dividends, right? But it's also the stakeholders, right? So when you were infantry officer in Iraq, it wasn't just about the men and women that you served with, it was also about their families who were the stakeholders, right?
Saddle self.
Right, right.
So, saddle self.
Yep. All right, so we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back on Warrior Money. Welcome back. We're here with Paul Rieckhoff, Army veteran, author, and longtime post-9/11 voice of our generation. Paul, you've said it before that veterans cannot afford to sit on the sidelines. Why is that?
The moment's too big. I was just talking to some folks before I came in here, and they asked, I'm going to give a talk next month around Veterans Day. And they said, what's your main message? I said, veterans are not a charity, they're an investment. And it's an investment that you and all of us have been making for 20 years since we came home from Iraq and Afghanistan. And now it's time for that investment to pay off. Right? Like, we need folks to rise to this moment. A lot of folks, and I think this is important too, in the social space, in the political space, in the nonprofit space. It's great you're going out and making money, but you got to give back to your community, if only because our young people need positive role models, even if it's coaching Little League, right? You need to be involved in your community. You can't just sit behind your desk and make your money. This is not a time where we can afford to do that. You have to find ways to give back and to be a positive influence on your community, because energy is contagious, man. And there's a lot of toxic energy. There's a lot of division. There's a lot of fear. Yeah. And we need leaders, men and women, who've been steeled in combat and steeled by their experiences to set forward
and also
give our children.
Who worked with other people. Yeah. They know how to work with people from Alabama and Georgia and other places across the world. But I would tell you,
even Philadelphia.
I would we really draw the line between New York Giants fans and Philadelphia fans. I'm not sure I can work with you. One of the things that and you said even coaching local baseball, I think it all starts at coaching local baseball. Or I'm running for borough council. I'm running for the first time. My election's in November. Danny Sisler's an Army veteran. He's running for Bucks County Sheriff. Patrick, we all kind of know where Patrick has worked and served. But I think there's a new generation of folks that is realizing that the national politics might be broken, or at least unidentifiable. Yeah. So the place to start is local sports and local borough councils and counties, because that's really where trust is really earned again. So I'd love your perspective on that.
The old saying, all politics is local, I think is definitely true. But we also have to understand politics does not have to be partisan. Part of why we started Independent Veterans of America, and I know this is getting into politics, but I think it's important because politics impacts business. Politics impacts society. And right now, there are a lot of folks who want to serve who aren't Republicans and Democrats. Yep. We are actually the majority now, the unaffiliated, the independents. And you don't have to pick a side, right? You don't have to pick Coke or Pepsi anymore. There are other options. And you can say none of the above. I like iced tea, right? And that's really where we are now, is especially young people. 60% of young people are independent and unaffiliated, and especially at the local level. You want to run for school board, you want to run for county commissioner, you want to run for mayor. You don't have to pick a side. You can run because you're a patriot, you can run because you're a leader, you can run because you got business experience. And if you don't want to run for office, you can still serve on a community board, you can coach, you can
see so quickly somebody that's served before and how they serve at the local levels. You can almost immediately see, you can even tell, to your point, when they coach their kids' sports teams, who has military bearing, who understands how to lead effectively at the most local level. I know you coach hockey, we talk baseball, but it's crazy.
Yeah, and your point, for veterans, most veterans are independents. Most of veterans are, 53% of veterans aren't affiliated with Democrat, Republican. They're actually unaffiliated or affiliated as an independent. And in states like Pennsylvania, where Dan and I reside, they can't vote in primary elections. So you think about, everyone pays taxes, and I'm for semi-open primaries, meaning if you're a Democrat, you shouldn't be able to vote in Republican primary or vice versa. But if you're independent, you would get more moderate candidates in these primaries if you allow independents to vote in either Democrat or Republican.
I think it's 100%. The most broken part of our political process is that primaries aren't open. I agree. And I think this is really, really important to understand. Primaries are publicly funded. Right? So the public funds go to private primaries for the Democrats or Republicans. They use voting machines. They use public schools, right? Yep. To execute a primary that not everybody can be a part of. And I think the key here is just fully open primaries in all 50 states where everybody can vote on the person rather than the party, and the parties don't dominate. That's what the market is asking for right now. And that's the really exciting part. The politics are not responding to what the market wants. So when you see somebody who is independent, who especially veterans, they can crack through and they can create trust. But I also think it's really important for folks to understand that politics is really icky right now, right? It's disgusting, it's toxic, it can be infuriating, but you got to get involved at the local level in some way, because if you don't, that partisan's willing to
somebody's going to get
that radical, that partisan, that
fill the vacuum.
And because of the partisan primaries, what you're getting is more and more extreme candidates on the left and the right, and that doesn't represent most Americans. So part of what we're doing with our media business is filling that void. We're answering that base, and that's also what we're doing on the nonprofit side, is trying to help independent candidates run who don't don't have the big money, who don't have a billionaire behind them. They just want to serve. Yeah. But we need to create those pathways. So what we're really doing is creating a new political business model, right, that breaks up the old one, is disruptive, and creates a better outcome ultimately for the market and for the consumer, for the voter.
Yeah. Can I ask a real quick question?
Please.
I want to hear more about your nonprofit leadership, right? You can have some big nonprofits. You can talk a little bit about that, but like, we talk about nonprofit and we think they either don't make any money or they're not relevant or they're not big at scale. And then therefore they don't necessarily need big executives to be able to run that. I don't think you think that way. So I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think, I ran a sizable nonprofit. I think at one point we had over $20 million budget. There are nonprofits that are $500 million. I mean, that's a massive market cap, right? But oftentimes people are like, oh, nice little nonprofit executive, right? Nonprofit executives still go to business school. They still have extremely good training, right? They know how to run a budget. They know how to lead teams, but they're just choosing a different path. I think it's really important that people understand they're not less than, right? They're not like the B team or the kids table because they're a nonprofit. They're just choosing a different path. So it took me a while to understand that really what I was a social entrepreneur, right? I was trying to build nonprofit businesses that made a positive impact, that did things like help veterans or respond to homelessness. And that requires a lot of the same business skills, but you've actually got to be more creative because at the end of 10 years of your company, you're not getting a payout. You're not getting stock options. There's no, it's like, hey, bud, great job, good job. Now here's the next nonprofit that needs your help, right? It's almost like serving in the military.
Yeah, totally.
But I do think we have to celebrate those people because they're the ones that are going in when there's a forest fire, when there's a flood, when there's a national disaster. Then you understand, and we understand government can't work quickly enough. I don't know if you've had Jake Wood on as an example, right? But you look at an organization like Team Rubicon that organizes veterans to go into disaster areas. They are nimble, they are dynamic, they are highly effective, and they're a nonprofit model that runs in and purpose-driven. And the people there, pound for pound, are as talented as anybody else. And I would actually choose them over the private sector folks because I know what they stand for. They're not just there for a paycheck.
For the veterans or military folks, military troops currently in right now, what's the piece of advice that you would give them? 200,000 are going to transition out every single year, right? And when you look at some problems like 24% unemployment rate with military spouses right now, but what's that one piece of advice? I know I tell them, hey, be confident. Like the Army, that's like a Fortune 2 size company. Like you have the skills to do great things, but it's up to them to translate their skills in that next job and to solve the next pain points for that next team that they're going to join. But what's the piece of advice that you would give them?
I mean, first of all, you always have to have a plan, but that can be difficult when you're transitioning. I think, there's the Glengarry, Glen Ross line, always be closing, right?
ABC, baby.
Coffee's for closers, right? I think you have to understand it will require a degree of relentlessness, right? Whether you're fundraising or you're looking for a mentor, you're going to have to ask 50 times to get one yes. And it's a level of rejection you might not be comfortable with. You got to take some shots to score some goals. And I think the persistence is what is most important. You're not going to hit that home run right away. Maybe you will be. Maybe you'll be Ohtani, right? But more likely, you're going to have to grind away and look for your spots and hit them when you do. And also, I think really importantly, Patrick, understand you are part of the greatest alumni network in America.
100%.
Right? And you have to activate that alumni network. Patrick Murray's not going to call you up and say, hey, man, how you doing today? What's your plan for the next 2 weeks? But if you're listening right now and you reach out to Patrick Murphy, he'll probably respond to you. He'll probably connect you with someone else. And seek out mentors who are doing the thing that you want to do. Right? If you want to go work in tech, if you want to be a forest ranger, you want to be a firefighter, talk to veterans who've been down that road, because there's a lot of us now. We're 20 years down the line, and they will activate around you and really welcome you in a way that you probably don't appreciate. But you got to ask. You got to put your head out there and understand that Vietnam vets, the remaining World War II vets, they will all work around you, and it's kind of a secret squirrel handshake. Once you get into that company or that police force, they're going to look out for you.
Yeah,
and they want you to succeed.
And I know Dan and I are in venture capital, and like we look at head the veteran World War II, start their own small business, create at Walmart, Nike, Comcast, et cetera. Our generation of Iraq, Afghanistan veterans, it's less than 5%, right? So, but what we tell people when you're saying that the crest is now happening, what you're seeing though in the business side, Sam Walton started Walmart. He's age 41. Right? They don't do it at 22, and so we'll see. Well, listen, that was a rapid fire, Paul.
One of the other things though is if sometimes feels so unapproachable, right? Yeah, that's what Paul is identifying. You got to figure out how to get either small or local enough to just get started. And it doesn't matter where you're going to. And I think that's what the difference is. Like I see Walmart, and I'm like, I can't make that, but I can make the next step to get started.
And I think we're also at a point where we're breaking kind of a glass ceiling. I don't know if you've had Blake Hall on as an example, right? Yes. There are guys out there that are about to be billionaires that have broken that seal, and folks like you that are giving back. So I think once we crack that seal and we start to take care of our own, reinvest in our own, the capital base is now growing, which has been a barrier for a long time. And they can help you leverage things like the GI GI Bill or
And
a
the
VA
network
home
and all
loan,
those other
small
things.
business
Yeah.
loans. I just got a rebate for my housing allowance in New York City because I own my home. We worked hard to create a veterans allowance that now, condo boards in New York City are incentivized to bring veterans in. All those pieces are set up for you, but you often need kind of a friend that can help you through that Ouija board. And it's not a secret decoder ring. It's a language and it's a pathway that has been cleared for you. And frankly, they've got it a lot easier than we did when we came home in 2004. And we had it a lot easier than when guys and gals came back in 1969.
No doubt.
So it's all about giving back and looking out for our own. We're all in this together. And I think the veterans community, most of all, is an example for America. America's looking for leaders. They're looking for role models. They're looking for people who are going to step up. And the men and women we've served with are ready to do that.
Totally.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, listen, that wraps up Word Money for this week. That was Rapid Fire with Paul Rieckhoff. Check us out wherever you hear podcasts for finance at Yahoo Finance. I'm Patrick Murphy.
And I'm Dan Kunze. We'll see you again next week.
This content was not intended to be financial advice and should not be used as a substitute for professional financial services.